Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Matias. I'm the Community Coordinator for Texas Health and Environment Alliance, or THEA. We are so excited to have you join us for this introduction webinar, CHEJ at THEA, What This Means for Communities. As many of you know, the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice is now a national program of THEA, and today we're going to talk more about that. But before I introduce our speaker, a couple of housekeeping items. The presentation today will last about 30 minutes, and there will be a Q&A session afterwards. Please be sure to keep your microphones on mute to avoid background noise. You are welcome to leave your questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and we will be monitoring it and do our best to get them answered during the Q&A. We would like to get to know our audience better, so there is a poll that will pop up on your screen when you join. If you could please indicate what state or country you're joining us from, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, without further ado, please welcome our speaker, Jackie Metcalf, founder and executive director of Texas Health and Environment Alliance, which now serves as the national home for the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. Jackie holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science with a focus in environmental geology and is a graduate of Rice University's graduate program for nonprofit leadership. Jackie founded THEA more than a decade ago after discovering that her own community along the San Jacinto River was living next to a contaminated Superfund site without clear information about the health risks. What began as a small neighborhood effort has grown into a nationally recognized organization supporting communities facing toxic contamination across Texas and now nationwide through CHEJ. Under her leadership, THEA organized more than 55,000 residents around a full cleanup of the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site and has helped communities navigate complex regulatory and public health systems. Jackie was awarded the Champion for Change Award by Lois Gibbs at Love Canal's 40th anniversary and is widely recognized for bridging science, community health, and grassroots leadership. Today, she will share her story, the history of THEA, the transition of CHEJ under THEA's stewardship, and what this next chapter of national community leadership looks like.
Thank you, Victoria. All right, does everybody see my slide okay? Great.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I see many familiar names and faces, and then a lot of new folks as well. So I'm really excited for this opportunity to talk with you all today. So as you're aware, CHEJ is now a national program of Texas Health and Environment Alliance. And this transition is about continuity, it is about stewardship, and really a generational handoff for the next chapter of environmental leadership and advocacy across our country. I started THEA over a decade ago, not because I ever planned to work for a nonprofit or run a nonprofit, but because my own community was living amongst Superfund sites and we didn't know let alone what that word meant, let alone what it meant for our health. And before I talk more about our work as an organization, I want to talk about my community and what led to THEA's founding. So I thought, what better way than to put up this part of a fabulous cartoon series that was published in the Houston Chronicle and created by Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist Nick Anderson. And this is part of the San Jacinto River in Peril series. And it starts really with the beginning of my journey, realizing that it was the environment making my family and I sick. Unlike Lois, I started as a sick daughter. And so my mom was the caretaker, the angry mama bear who had a daughter and a husband who were very sick, and we couldn't figure out what was going on with our health. At the time, I was studying environmental science and geology, and I heard that Houston's tap water was radioactive. And so I decided to study our well water as part of my hydrogeology case study one semester. And I ended up finding that our well had heavy metals in it, so much so that you could literally see the metal with your eyes, not even something that needed to be run through instrumentation to understand that there was metal in the water. And up until that point, we were just naive we thought that, my family bought their dream home. We moved out to a rural part of Harris County, about 15 miles east of Houston, and we thought we were doing the right thing, having our own groundwater well, raising chickens and eating their eggs. And we thought if something were ever wrong with our environment, that someone would knock on our door or the government would send us a letter. And we learned this lesson the hard way, like so many of us do. And at the time, we had been experiencing health problems, and some of them were the same as what our animals were experiencing, but we just didn't know any better. We didn't put two and two together until that water study. And we then became students of our environment. And in my environmental management course, my professors were encouraging us to study the environment around where we lived. And all of this was circling and swirling together, with the health problems and studying the environment and trying to figure out what on earth could be going on. And I started with the obvious, and that was the current day emitters. It's a very industrialized area, and we would see local barge yards and facilities putting off orange and green and yellow plumes of smoke and emissions. And we thought, well, that can't be good for our health. And so I started looking into those entities and seeing, well, this isn't what is in my body. This isn't what's in our water. And continued researching and found out that my mother's dream home was in between four Superfund sites. And one of them, the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site, was sitting in the San Jacinto River, openly exposed. I'd grown up recreating in the river. I'd literally been on top of that site before in the river, and we had no idea. And so we started researching day and night, trying to figure out, how this could have gotten to our home and into our water, and trying to understand what we could even do about it. One of the first things that we did was we started going door to door, because if the environment is making if it was the environment making us sick, then our neighbors would have been impacted to some capacity as well. And so we started talking to our neighbors about our health, something that we don't do enough of, that we should all do more of, because if it is the environment, we're going to have something in common to talk about. And then one of the other things we did was we started hauling our water. As you can see down here in the bottom of the first cartoon, that's illustrating my mom driving the truck with a trailer and a tank of water. And literally right here, just east of Houston, Texas, we were hauling our water every other day to our home and pumping it into our house. And that was a safer water supply. But ultimately, we ended up leaving the area. I thought, if we could just demonstrate to the EPA, to the Environmental Protection Agency, to the state of Texas, if we could just show them that this stuff is in our environment, that this stuff is, or that our community's sick, and we believe this stuff is making us sick, that surely they would step in and do something about it. But we learned that that's not enough, and that this data and the facts and the science is not enough to set a community free. So like Lois, we learned that it wasn't enough, and that we were going to have to organize in order to create change that our community so desperately needed. And this realization really is what set us on the same path that Lois was on. She gathered the data. She went door to door. She was told it was a dumb housewife's study whenever they gathered health information in their community. And she learned, like us, the hard way, that you have to organize, you have to build pressure, and you have to make it impossible for the government to ignore your community. The lessons that we learned in my community in San Jacinto, the lessons that Lois learned and has taught me and our organization over the years, really shaped THEA and our path forward. So combining science and organizing, we learned that there's a tremendous amount of power. And we organized over 55,000 people around a cleanup plan for the Superfund site. And if you're not familiar with the term Superfund site, it's an abandoned toxic waste site that threatens public health and or the environment and is listed as a priority for the national government to clean up. However, it's a broken regulatory system. And so there are a lot of trials and tribulations in the process. And we had to organize our community to around one central goal, and that was cleaning up the site and making it better for our current and our future generations. And that was going door to door, knocking on thousands of doors, petitioning the government, organizing mailings and petitions to the government. And you can see down here the bottom photo. My mom, of course, always by my side in the right of the photo. But you can see in this photo, even when I was so sick, I was in a wheelchair. I was still out front of the community, leading them, beside them, behind them, making sure that our voices were going to be heard. And in this photo, we were asking the residents at our community meeting to raise their hand if they or a loved one were struggling with cancer or a chronic health condition. We also utilize press and making sure that we are holding everyone accountable by putting information out there, the truth, putting facts and the truth out there to the masses to help get a shared understanding, but also so that the EPA and others know that if it's the truth, that we're gonna say it, we're gonna share it, and we're not afraid to do that. Also, looking at the science, we commission different studies when needed, and then also internally are able to support our communities from a very scientific perspective. We have worked with multiple communities over the years. After this first study here, the map you see with the red and the yellow circles, that was a cancer assessment that we worked on with Texas Department of State Health Services and have since worked on multiple similar studies with communities and really learned the ins and outs of these types of complex health studies. And then up in the top right, that photo, very meaningful moment for me. Oftentimes in my career, I have been the youngest in the room and oftentimes the only female. And the two gentlemen to my right were appointed in President Trump's first administration, and that was his first EPA administrator. And I'm sitting down, youngest, only female in the room, and just going toe to toe with these guys and advocating for our community. And I even looked at Administrator Pruitt and I said, our community and even my own dad, who has multiple myeloma, my dad says he will not live to see the end of this cleanup. And that struck him. And so being able to bring all of the voices to people that make decisions is very critical and has shown to be very powerful. Ultimately, after Hurricane Harvey, EPA Administrator Pruitt ruled in favor of the community's position and ruled against our responsible parties for the site, Waste Management and International Paper, two giant corporations, and he sided with the community. So what we've learned here, we have applied to other communities across our region. The map that you see here is an outline of Harris County, the county that we live in here. And the smaller dots are old industrial sites that have never been investigated, so it's unknown whether or not they're contaminated. The larger red and orange dots are Superfund sites. We have just over 24 here in our region. And the ones with the blue water drop THEA logo are the communities that we work very intensely in. And in the three communities indicated there, we have built meaningful relationships and coalitions of diverse community members, businesses, elected officials, working with whomever is in office and whomever can champion the voice of our community members. We've supported our communities with health advocacy, whether it's cancer assessments or maternal health, birth defect studies. We've developed curriculum for environmental health leadership training. When I first learned the term environmental health literacy, I thought, This is amazing. There's actually a term for what I'm super passionate about, and it is the relationship between one's environment and their health. And so, based on our years of experience, and again, many of the teachings from Lois, we created a curriculum to help train others in more of a formal way how to do this type of work and how to create these types of movements on their own. And this is something that can be replicated in any community across the country. We have many partnerships with academics and research institutions. We're stronger, most certainly, when we work together. We provide technical and regulatory support to communities across the region and have certainly garnered, well over 1,000 different media stories over the years, both local and national. And we have a dedicated staff, a dedicated board of directors, and incredible volunteers and donors who have supported us for many years. So now, how we came to be in this position that we are in today. The call, the moment that that THEA stepped forward. And you'll see here Lois Gibbs, the founder of the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. She is on the phone in front of a building that actually the state of New York gave the Love Canal Homeowners Association to be their headquarters. And she's on the phone with the White House and demanding that they buy out 800 plus homes and families from the Love Canal community. I love this photo. It's such a snapshot of history that stands still. And thinking about the call that we received. So last summer, I received a call from CHEJ's longtime science director. He actually worked along Lois back then in Love Canal and was a toxicologist working with her then and working with the state of New York. And I received a phone call from Stephen, and he said, Jackie, we are going to shut our doors. All of our staff is retiring. Lois has already retired. And we've tried to replace Lois. We've tried to establish a new executive director within CHEJ, and we've not been successful doing that. And so we want to give you the opportunity to carry whatever you'd like of CHEJ forward. And now this was last summer, right? And so think about, the climate in our country. And I guess I mean climate in many ways. Think about what's been going on, the federal cuts, so many different things going on in our country. And I thought, not now. American communities cannot lose CHEJ, and especially not right now. I remember a time where I didn't know who could help us. We were failing by just using the science, by just demonstrating that this stuff was in our bodies and in our water and in our river and in our fish. And CHEJ was there for us, and they helped us. And not only did they help us with strategy and organizing, but with mini grants. And there was a time where, we greatly depended on CHEJ mini grants to help support our work. And that, might have been the difference between me being able to prepare the materials for my community. And so when Stephen told me that, all I could think was not now. And we have to have a serious conversation about how to carry this forward. So Stephen and I, after, we had that conversation, and then I immediately started calling my board of directors and talked with them about how we needed to step up and step into this role to prevent communities from losing this national resource. We wanted to carry forward the institutional knowledge, the publications, all of the experience, all of the lessons learned. Some of this stuff, can be learned on paper, through books, through series, but a lot of it is storytelling and sharing experiences and connecting people. And without CHEJ, we just didn't think that was going to be able to continue. So Since then, we've worked very closely with CHEJ staff. I've gone out there to Washington, D.C. and sat with them. And we also worked for several months with the group Just Moms and talking about what this looks like, what carrying this work forward would look like, and what it could look like. And this year, it became official that CHEJ is now formally at home with Texas Health and Environment Alliance. So, a little bit about what this transition is and what it isn't. I know we have folks here from Texas, from our base here in the Houston-Galveston region, and folks nationwide. And so, I have two very important audiences that that I'm speaking to here. So first I'll say it's a transition of stewardship. It is a generational transition. When longstanding leadership prepares to retire, we knew we needed to step forward to ensure that communities everywhere wouldn't lose this national resource. So CHEJ remains as it has been as a national program. Their training model continues, the philosophy remains intact, and we're preserving the grassroots DNA. However, THEA will as well remain deeply committed to our communities here in the Houston-Galveston region and across Texas. So I certainly want to assure you that our organization, our local work, and CHEJ's national work is not going anywhere. So this is succession. It's not consolidation. So it's not that we are changing our board of directors or leaving behind anything on CHEJ's regard with the structure of the organization. So CHEJ is under THEA's 501c3, and our leadership is the same leadership as CHEJ. So what's kind of different about like a merger or a consolidation is that the structure is one, and picking it up and carrying it forward. It's more of program and project integration. So what comes next? We have already set in motion Toxic Tuesdays. We've already started the national training calls, and we actually have one coming up in 2 weeks. And then we have also started supporting communities who have contacted us or contacted us even via CHEJ's website. All of that has been integrated into our organization. And so we've began helping communities with the strategic science and as well as organizing and grassroots strategy. And we have also secured funding to launch mini grants this summer. So CHEJ had actually announced, I assume many of you were on their emailing list. So they had actually announced last summer that they were going to be closing their doors. And when they did that, they had already set in motion to sunset their programs. So you might have noticed that Toxic Tuesdays were no longer going out, their national training calls were no longer taking place. And that was because they were preparing to shut their doors until Steven and I had that conversation. And then it was a ramp up of a transition and figuring out, okay, can we do this? And how are we going to do this? And so that's what was taking place since last summer. But this year, we have already gotten several of these items off the ground. While we are working to get more of the back end and institutional items in place and strengthen the infrastructure, we did not want the communities to lose these vital resources. So we've started doing Toxic Tuesdays around some of the issues that we know people here locally are struggling with. But please, if you and your community or a community you know of, you have something that y'all are struggling with, let us know. Like, we would be happy to have our team scientist produce a Toxic Tuesday that would be meaningful for your community and a tool that you could use. Okay, so back to strengthening the infrastructure. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes to be able to do this work. If any of y'all have organized, you know that. You know that there is only so much of the actual work that is public facing. And so on the back end, we have over 40 years of an organization and of work that we've been working to preserve and transfer into THEA's house, so to speak. That's, preserving things like the publications, the relationships, the infrastructure such as websites, training materials, the process for many grants, past grantees, all of the different uh, resources that CHEJ has on its website. It has an extensive resources library, making sure that none of that is lost and that we can pick up and carry forward. We're also establishing internal operations. I'll talk about my team here just in a minute, but we have pivoted big time. We are very much working intensely here in our region, just the same, but we've all taken on an additional workload of how we're going to integrate national inquiries into our day-to-day workload, how we're going to break down technical information basically on the fly as communities reach out to us and need that support. So establishing our internal operations and making sure that we are equipped and have the processes in place to be that smooth and swift resource that communities really need. We're also working to engage local and national partners that CHEJ has established over the years. Some of you I've met over the years through working with CHEJ. I've worked on several of their big campaigns and worked very closely with Lois and Stephen for a long time. And so I do have some relationships with CHEJ's base, but their base is so extensive. And so integrating all of that, re-engaging the base of partners and communities. And then, of course, building a sustainable funding base. All of this takes funding. And so ensuring that we can raise the funds to not only do this work, but sustain this work. It is very important to me. It is very important to our board and to our team that we continue to meet communities where they are, just like I once was, just like my family once was, because what we went through is not unique. What we experienced, thinking that if our environment was making us sick, somebody was going to let us know, it's not unique. Millions of people in our country have these same experiences. And so we want to make sure that we can sustain this work and that we don't fall short in our capabilities to do that. So my team, this is our Texas-based full-time staff. And so in addition to myself, we have these four lovely ladies who work full-time here at our Houston office. And they all have a bit of a diverse set of backgrounds. And I'd say something that we share. Between the five of us, there are 8 kiddos that we have birthed and are raising. And aside from our children, we all have fur babies and love animals and are very passionate about humans, animals, and the environment. Christy, as you'll see here on the screen, her background is in environmental science and biology. And many of you further engaging with the organization we'll talk with Christy. You will definitely engage with Christy. She is one of our best team members out in the communities and helping communities, standing right beside them. And then Victoria, her background is in ecology and environmental management, and she's another one of our team members that you all will likely become very familiar with, and she leads our national training series. So y'all will see her month in and month out on our training series as well. And then Kristen's background is actually in midwifery and bookkeeping. And Kristen is a vital team member that makes sure the House of THEA and the House of CHEJ is running and that everything's in order and accounted for. And then Amy, her background is in public relations and environmental management. And so she helps us with communications and development. And then 2 of our team members who are not pictured here. We have 2 gentlemen that we have welcomed to THEA's home from CHEJ. And so we have Greg, who is their longtime communications and IT consultant. And then we have Mahir, who was CHEJ's science associate for many years. And one of my immediate thoughts when I got that call from Stephen about CHEJ shutting its doors was, I was very sad that Stephen was letting me know he was going to be retiring. But I thought, what about Mahir? The type of science advice that CHEJ provides to communities is incredibly unique. And so for me, I immediately wanted to know, what is Mahir doing next? Because he has been hand trained by Stephen, by the Love Canal toxicologist, who is not afraid to say, this is or could be what is impacting your community, and is not afraid to talk about risks and how the government looks at risk. And so there's a very unique lens that these gentlemen have. And so Mahir has also joined our team, and so he's working with us as our team scientist. Okay, so as I close my presentation, I just want to return back to something simple. CHEJ has spent more than 40 years teaching communities how to understand what is happening around them and how to act. THEA was built from that same belief that families deserve clear information, honest answers, and a pathway to action. This transition is not replacing one organization or the other. It's about ensuring that decades of knowledge, strategy, and grassroots wisdom do not disappear at a moment when they're truly needed the most. Leadership transitions happen, staff retires. The folks at CHEJ had been there for over 40 years. That is, I mean, a true, snapshot of what an incredible life's work they have all had there, and for all of us. But organizations evolve, but the need for organized communities doesn't go away when all these changes happen. If you are from an impacted community, you know how much we all need this work. So if anything, the need is increasing, but we're stepping into stewardship of CHEJ because we believe deeply that this national infrastructure must continue and it must grow. So now it lives within THEA for the next chapter. So to the longtime CHEJ leaders and supporters, thank you. Thank you for building something that has mattered and mattered enough to preserve it. And to our THEA community, thank you for the many years of trust that you have put in us to be beside you, behind you, and even leading you at times, and being your voice and empowering your voice. And thank you for trusting us to step into this role, and trusting that we're not leaving our Houston folks behind. Our roots are here. We will always be here. And the work here, as well as across the nation, is very important to us. So we look forward to building this next chapter together. And now I would like to open it up for Q&A, so that you guys can make your comments, ask me questions. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. What a wonderful, wonderful sentiment we are being left with. If anybody has any questions, now is the time. Please drop them in the chat, or if you'd like to open up your microphone and ask your question, feel free to raise your hand and we will signal for you to ask. I'm keeping an eye on the chat and the participants to make sure we don't miss anyone. Okay, we have a hand from Lila Parker.
Hi, everybody. I am Lila Parker here in Cleveland, Ohio. I am a member of the CLASH organization advocating for safe housing, led specifically. My question is, how will we go about finding scientists in our region? We may have scientists. I know over the year we tried to have a few people come out and do the lead testing within the soil and within homes. Is there a way that each year that list of scientists regenerate, or is there some way that we can go to institutions to find scientists to help us conduct studies, especially for water here?
Great question. Thank you for that question. And you mentioned a list, right? And so one of the things that we're working on is putting together what we call a phone book. And so we're going to be surveying all of the hundreds of national partners of CHEJ and to get an understanding of what types of expertise they can currently provide to communities and what they're willing to provide to communities. And so that's something that we're working on right now. We certainly have our team scientist who is available to assist communities. But in terms of someone specific in your region, if you're looking for more of like a long-term and local relationship or regional relationship, I definitely recommend research institutions. That's been a great resource for us here locally. They can certainly help strengthen your efforts, but they can also come with certain limitations, and those relationships as well can be dynamic. But I would love to, if you were interested, we could definitely set up a meeting with you, some of our team members, and just kind of brainstorm maybe different areas you could look into.
That will be great. I can also see if other members of the organization will be willing to join.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. We have another question in the chat from Elizabeth Graves. We are seeing legislation here in KY, Kentucky, that would devastate precautionary principles as the basis of public health and environmental regulation. Any advice?
Organize. Organize. Let your voices be heard, most certainly. Organize all of the elected officials you can, in addition to your local community members. Here in our region, our congressional delegation, anyways, is pretty split, Democrats and Republicans. And so, or not being afraid to reach across the aisle, whomever is elected, try to get them in line with your community's position. Advocating for public health is certainly incredibly important and something that I think that they should advocate for. Now, what we see in practice can be a little different, but research your elected officials, see how you can reason with them and level with them, and see what they care about. Because your messaging, person to person and elected to elected, is going to be different. You have to understand what people care about. But the most powerful thing I believe that you can do is organize and sprinkle a little bit of facts along in there, along the way.
All right. We have a question from Pam Bonta. Can other states go on EWG water database?
Yes. So Pam Bont is actually my mom. So thanks, Mom, for referencing that. So my mom is always still right, right by my side. And EWG is the Environmental Working Group's tap water database. If you're not familiar with this, this is the most conclusive national database of what public water providers are reporting to the federal government, that what is in the water they're providing. And so EWG Tap Water Database is something that if you are provided water by a public supplier, you can go on there and find information on your water source.
Wonderful. Our next question is coming from Renee Kale. What strategies are you suggesting to keep data centers out of vulnerable, overburdened communities? And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Yes, so this is an emerging issue for so many of us, and there are a lot of concerns. We've been contacted by people who are concerned about data centers and in varying stages of the process. And so, I also you see different news stories circulating and hear different concerns, whether it's fires, power grid, and water usage, a lot of different concerns. And, I'll definitely have to go back to the organizing thread. I would recommend getting in early. The earlier you can get in the public process, the better. And so making sure you try to look at the newspaper, get on any type of list if they're sending out any alerts and permitting that might go out. Sometimes these hearings are posted in the newspaper like the day of, right? And that's by design. They count on that. They don't want people to show up. And so stay on top of it. The newspaper still matters. There are still hearings and things that go in there. So don't throw it by the wayside. Look into it regularly and show up. If there is something, if there is an opportunity, if there is even a decision maker. Early on, the former head of the EPA and I don't know, 15 years ago, we had a joke that if he was anywhere in Texas, I was going to show up and I was going to hand him a manila folder filled with information that I wanted him to see. So don't ever count on the decision makers knowing what you think is important. They're just being briefed. They're just receiving information from staff, from lobbyists, from different people. So don't ever count that they know your side, that they know your story or what your ask is. So show up and get your information in front of them in any way you can. And so our running joke was I was providing him his reading material for the flight back.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And she pronounced my name pretty well.
Awesome.
Yay. All right. Any more questions coming in? Another question pops up, I want to read this comment from Jennifer Hadea from Airlines Houston. And she comments, in Texas, you can sign up for airmail, which is automated permit notification. And she dropped the link in the chat. So shout out to Airlines there.
Yes, that's a fabulous resource. Thank you, Jen.
All right, folks, this is your moment. We still have a few minutes before hopping off. Please ask your burning questions.
Hello, I'm from Buffalo, New York. My name is Cindy Stroud, and I'm with Clean Air Coalition of Western New York. Just have a comment. I am not far from Love Canal, about 15, 20 miles away from it. What I find incredible is that young people that are not from this region have come and started building homes there. You can't clean up that piece of land,
Yeah.
but they don't know it. I just find it incredible. And I'm thinking, are we doing any type of testing or anything on new homes before we buy them around the area? In Buffalo, we are a cancer cluster. We did a soil sampling with another organization last year. So the highest level is supposed to be around 200. We were getting readings of 12,000.
Oh,
If you ever heard of Roswell in Buffalo, New York, there's no wonder they're the number one leading cancer institutions in our area.
mhm.
It's so much. It's so much pollution and disparities in this city. It is amazing.
Mhm.
So I understood everything that you were saying, what you were going through. It's a lived experience for a lot of us, especially in our communities, the disadvantaged communities.
Mhm.
Cindy,
Yes.
did you say the highest level of lead was 200, over 2? Can you repeat that, please?
So on the chart, they say, the highest level should be around 200. That's dangerous.
Uh-huh.
When we did sampling, we had levels of 12,000.
Good grief. My goodness. And that's lead.
That's lead. We
Oh
live
my
in
gosh.
homes. Our homes are 120 plus years old. Guess how old our pipes are?
Mhm.
We have lead pipe. Buffalo is just as bad as Love Canal.
Dang.
And, they're still finding, or in more recent times, still finding that the dioxin and the waste material from Love Canals made its way into basements in recent years. And so that's, part of the problem here with these sites is that, well, one, the laws are just not on our side.
Right.
That the laws are not for us. And so you get a lot of breakdown in the process and for the people who are actually living there. And the processes are so long. And when oftentimes these sites aren't fully cleaned up, the problems or the threats can continue or pop back up, particularly if there's not somebody keeping them under their thumb and being a watchdog on the process. And they count on that, right? People moving away, getting sick, getting tired, dropping off. And you see that ebb and flow through time. And it's certainly, sad that people come in and don't have any idea.
How do you clean up a super fund like
Thank,
that?
thank you so much, Cindy.
Yeah.
If you don't mind us, we're going to put a pin on that question so that we can give an opportunity to some of the other questions that are being dropped in the chat. I will write it down here for you. How do we clean up a Superfund site, such as Bluff Canal? But I
Thank you
want
so
to
much.
address some of the questions in the chat as well. And Lila, I do see your hand. I made a note of it. Again, we'll circle back to you. Okay, so our next question says, do you know who created the airmail permit site? I would be interested in how this might benefit my people here in North Carolina. And I'm gonna answer that myself. It is Air Alliance Houston. You can find them online, check out their website. I'm sure there's some contact information. If we have anyone from Air Alliance on the call, if you don't mind dropping your contact in the chat to this person. Um, this question came from Anita Cunningham.
And I see Jen
Oh,
raised her
yes.
hand.
Thank you. I just noticed that. Jen, do you want to step in for a moment?
No worries. I was responding in the chat. For now, the airmail tool only works in the state of Texas. However, it has capabilities that with a host, an organizer, organizing entity like another nonprofit like ours, and some funding, but not exorbitant, we can build airmail out to function in other states. We're in the process of building a version of airmail for the state of Louisiana, but it's not live yet. We hope it'll be live by the end of this year. So currently, the airmail system only works in Texas, but it does work in every county in Texas, and it automatically compiles information, notifies you about all of the permits that come from our state regulator. So air permits, water permits, and municipal waste permits. But it is possible to build airmail for other states. It just requires an organization to help coordinate, and it requires some funding. I'm going to put my email here. Anyone who's interested, please reach out. I love giving airmail demos. I'll do them all day, every day. It's really an incredible organizing tool around site fights and permit opposition, because the regulators don't make it easy for us to know when that's happening. And we all know why that is. And that's why we created airmail. It was to shine a light on a very obtuse and vague, confusing permitting process that affects us day to day.
Thank you so much, Jen. All right, another question that has been dropped in the chat says, how can communities outside Houston contact THEA? Where should these national inquiries be directed?
You can direct them on CHEJ's website, chej.org, or on THEA's website, txhea.org. We have integrated everything on the back end, and so anything that goes to chej.org will certainly comes over, to us, and we will be able to respond. But whatever avenue, which of those is, better for you, that you're more comfortable with, you can reach us through either of those websites.
Thank you so much. Another question says, do you suggest local advocacy groups legally form a nonprofit business structure?
So I think forming a group is always the direction to go. It's definitely one of the things that CHEJ has always advised communities to do in forming a group. Now, whether that has to be a federally recognized 501c3 or not is a very personal choice, because you do have to establish a board of directors, and you do have responsibilities to the IRS. And so you want to ensure that if you are going to do that, that you're prepared and ready to take on the responsibilities of reporting and all of the governance items that are required by the IRS. The last thing you want to do is formalize with the IRS and not be prepared to meet the legal requirements that it takes. And so you want to do it at a time that is right for you. You can incorporate, or you have to incorporate in your state first. And so first incorporating in your state and then with the IRS is a two-step and quite lengthy process. But whether it's forming a group that is a committed group of individuals that regularly communicates and works together, or one that has an actual formal governance structure is, again, a very personal decision. But this work is a long-term commitment. And getting these sites cleaned up, ensuring our communities are protected, it is a long fight. That's why I incorporated THEA to be able to do this full time and to be able to help more communities like my own. But still today, I started working with my community back in 2011 and still today, week in and week out, doing the same. So if you are going to make a long-term commitment, it is a nice career choice to be able to do this work for your job, for your community.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for answering that. Another question says, is there any immediate plan to extend your interventions to Nigeria, especially the Niger Delta region, where there are high levels of environmental issues?
No, we don't at this time have our sights on that. I'm sorry to hear that. I know that contamination, and particularly in waterways around the world, is such a huge issue. But I'm curious, I could take a moment to look back at CHEJ's record and see if they have any contacts there. I'd be interested in learning more about that.
All right, awesome. So please reach out to us via the contacts that Jackie mentioned earlier. You can go to our website, txhea.org. Or email us at info@txhea.org. All right, so we're going to jump back to the question from Miss Cindy. How to clean up a Superfund? How do you clean up a Superfund site such as Love Canal?
So cleanups really vary greatly site by site. One of the things that I love to do is to use the laws, the regulations, and agency practices in our work. And so one of the things that we did for the site, that we worked on in my community, the Sanderson River Waste Pit Superfund site, was we worked with a geologist to study what similar Superfund sites there are in the US and how they were addressed. Now, there were 7 of them, and it showed us that all 7 of those saw removal of the dioxin waste. So like Love Canal, we have dioxin as our primary contaminant as well, and it's in a river. And so all 7 saw removal of the dioxin. And for us, our responsible parties were advocating so strongly to try to leave the waste in the river. And we're going like in our gut and in our soul, like we know this is about money, right? And just if these companies wanted to do the right thing, they wouldn't be forced by the federal government. They would just do it. And so we knew, but we were looking, what is the EPA's practices? What have they actually done in other areas? And so I think that's a very important step when you're trying to understand a site specifically or a contaminant specifically. For example, one of the other communities we've looked at is a perchloroethylene and vinyl chloride site. It was a dry cleaner that just would go out back and dump in modern day, 1988 to 02, would go out and dump their waste. And so their dry cleaning solvents. And so we looked at other perchloroethylene specific Superfund sites to be able to explain to the community what the remedy options are. So even understanding like what options are to clean up these sites is very important for the advocacy. And in something like Love Canal, they did put in a slurry wall. I've never heard of a slurry wall that worked. Maybe they're out there. Maybe they're out there. But in terms of any of the Superfund sites that I've ever come to know, I've never known one that was a full stop, didn't prevent offsite migration. At Love Canal, some of the sites here in Texas, the contaminant goes down and just around the slurry wall. And so at Love Canal, there were multiple items that were implemented. But with this type of waste, ultimately, if you don't remove it all, the threat will persist and the risk for it to migrate offsite will persist. But there are instances where you have Superfund sites that have a lot of volatile organic compounds in the site. And so sometimes physically removing the waste is actually not the best option, because then when you start opening up that site and you have chemicals that readily vaporize into the air, you have a whole different can of exposure taking place at that time. It's been done, in vacuumed systems. It's been done, but every remediation is sensitive and is handled differently.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for that wonderful insight. And we're circling back to Lila's question that she dropped in the chat. What are ways to hold them accountable for crimes against humanity?
Say that again, Victoria.
What are ways to hold them being, I assume, corporations, accountable for crimes against humanity?
Well, that's a tough question. I have been terribly discouraged by the legal system. So, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that route. Every avenue has its place. But I've never known a community that felt like they got justice through the legal system in these efforts. So, some people use different tactics, and you can find out when their shareholders' meetings are. Maybe you can get someone to be a shareholder. And that's oftentimes what these companies care about, right? Is returning money to their shareholders. And so you can make it so publicly known, whether to their shareholders and through the press in different communities, make it so publicly known that you put the pressure on them in an effort to hopefully compel them to act better or to do the right thing. But yeah, one of these processes individually often, still falls short for communities. And also, one thing I've learned about justice, that looks different door to door, household to household, and even in the same household. Back I had moved home because I was so sick when I was in my early 20s. And what my mom would say is justice and what I said is justice, would be very different. And so even within the same household. And so figuring out what that looks like is an important step.
Thank you, Jackie. All right. So it looks like that's all the questions we have so far. If there's any last questions, we have 3 minutes left on the call. Please drop them in the chat or raise your hand. While I give you an opportunity to do that, I do want to read a couple comments from the chat. Particularly, we have a comment from Lisa Gossett, who's one of THEA's board members. And she's saying she can discuss advantages and disadvantages of being a 501c3 nonprofit with those who want some private discussion. And she dropped her email address on the chat, which is lisa.gossett@sbcglobal.net. And you can find it on the chat here as well. All right. And I think we have time for one more question. I have a hand from Elizabeth Graves.
Hi, I'm joining from Kentucky, and I'm curious if you've done much work in the State House there in Texas, if you've tried to influence policymakers.
We have. It's not where we have focused. One of the things that, in the last legislative session that we worked on was notices if someone is moving within a certain proximity to a Superfund site. And so that's an example of something we've worked on. But we more so focus on like the day in, day out of the community's needs versus the long-term policy change. But we certainly do get involved from time to time. And here in Texas at the State House, it's been an interesting and unsettling experience over the years.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, that is time, y'all. We want to use these last few seconds we have to thank you all for joining this call today. Thank you for your valuable questions. Jackie, thank you for all the knowledge and for stepping up to carry this legacy forward. We hope to see you all at our next training call. That's going to be on digital media and how you can use that to advance your advocacy efforts. All right. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.